Okay, today we're doing 10-2 multiplying rational expressions. We're going to start with a little review of simplifying and stating the domain. The domain, remember, is your possible replacement values for a given variable. So when I give you a question like this, I want you to notice when you're reading, there are two directions. One says simplify. The other says state the domain for x. So the first thing you need to do is factor. It's always going to be step one, factor. How can I factor this fraction? Denominator. How about Mika?
You could factor out x.
I'm going to factor x times what?
X minus 4.
Good. Okay, so when I factor an x, I'm left with x minus 4. And this is the point, actually. Let me erase this. This is the point, I'm going to color code, that we are stating the domain. Okay? So this is the point where we say, what is x allowed to be? Because there is this rule in fractions that you cannot divide by x. That means 5 divided by 0 is not allowed. But 0 divided by 5 equals 0. Do you understand? So when you have a 0 in the denominator, it means it's not allowed. We're not allowed to do it. Thou shalt not divide by 0. That is one of the 10 commandments of math. So what at this point will give me a 0 in that denominator? I've got an x and an x minus 4. What would make the first one become a 0? If it's what? If x equals 0. So I'm going to write this and repeat after me. X is such that x is an element of the reals. That comma we say and. And x cannot equal what numbers? 0 or 4. If I had a 4 here, it would make it a 0, right? 4 minus 4 is 0. And if the x is a 0, it would give us a 0 right here. So, and then we're going to put that into braces. Now what that is stating the domain. Is everybody clear? Now the next part is to simplify. What can be simplified? Cross-canceled. What can be cross-canceled? Mika? The x. Okay, and then I'm left with 5 over x minus 4. So there's two parts to this. Okay, you guys try number 2 and 3. Pause the recording. All right, now let's check our work. So, as I mentioned, the second stage where we're factoring is where we determine our what the domain is for x. And the last part is the whole thing simplified. So on the first, number 2, your numerator should have been factored to x plus 3, x minus 3. And your denominator would be factored to 2x times the quantity of x minus 3. Now, here's something I want you guys to think about. First, I can cancel the binomial x minus 3. Now notice, I'm left with one binomial and the term 2x. I repeat, I cannot do this. Look, you can't take a piece of a binomial. Got it? Also, at this point, tell me about my domain. State the domain. Evan. X is
such that x is, it would be...
an element.
So the element O is an element
of the
reals, and x
cannot equal
0 or 3.
Perfect. Okay. And when I simplify it, the answer is x plus 3 over 2x. Okay, questions there? Okay, the next one should have factored 2 x plus 1 times the quantity of x minus 5. And the bottom one, the denominator would be x plus 2 over x minus 5. Now, when I simplify, I'm left with x plus 1 over x plus 2. However, when I'm doing my domain, it's really back at that first step. X is not allowed to equal negative 2. It is right here that I determine my domain. If I wait till the end, I'm going to miss one of the factors that I cross-canceled. Do you understand that? All right. So this was just a review from the other day. Now, the next lesson, if you understood what we did last night, then you're going to understand today's lesson because it's pretty easy. When we were multiplying monomials, or fractions made up of monomials, back in pre-algebra, we expanded it. By now, you should be able to do that with just cross-canceling. So, what common factor can I cross-cancel? Or cross-divide? Omar,
2x and 10.
how about it? Just give me a number or variable. Don't give me both. I don't want combination. 2. I can divide out a 2, and I'm left with a 1 in the numerator and a what in the denominator? 5. He said we could also divide out an x, and I'm left with a 1 here, and I'm left with a 1 here. What else could be divided out? Natalia?
9 and 3 you can divide by 3.
A 3, and I'm left with a 1, and in the 9 I'm left with a 3. Okay, or that y. We can either do that or circle it. So now I'm just going to multiply straight across after I've cross-canceled. 1 times 1 times 3 times y is 3y. 1 times 5 times 1 is over 5. Okay, so are there any questions here? Are we expanding? Are we expanding like this? No. Take too long. It'll eat too much of our time. Yes, Amanda.
I'm still confused on what we learned like a few seconds ago. How are we able to find?
All right, so I just answered that question. We'll just go on to the next section. Okay, so now let's have you guys do number 1. When you're done, please give me a thumbs up. All right, let's check our work. What can I divide out, Elizabeth? Give me a factor. I can cross-cancel.
Cross-cancel with 5.
Okay, 5 goes into 5 once and into 10.
And then it'll be a.
10 into 10 how many
Oh,
times?
into 10 2 times.
Good. What else?
A.
And in the numerator, I'm left with?
A.
And in the denominator, I'm left with?
None.
1. 1, not none.
And then B.
And what am I left with?
1.
And then in the denominator?
You're left with B squared.
Good. And what else can be divided out?
From 3, you can divide 3.
Okay. And in the denominator?
2.
2. And what else?
C.
Good.
B 1.
And
C.
good. Now, 1 times A times 1 times 1 times 1 is A. Okay? All over, 2 times 2 is 4. And I'm going to go in alpha order. B squared, C. Got that? So what do you think we do for number 2? What do I do to the top? What's that called? Evan,
Would you simplify?
what's it called? Answer my question. Mika.
Difference of square.
Okay, what do I do to it, Mika?
X plus 2 times x minus 2.
Good. And I've got 3x, so I factor it. And then I've got a 6x squared and an x plus 2. Now that I've factored, do I have to find the domain now? No, because it's not asking for that. Only when they ask for it. Okay, what can we cross-cancel, Musho?
6 and 3.
A 3. 3 goes into 3 once and into 6 how many times? Twice. What else? An x goes once, and here, what am I left with?
X,
Good. What else?
X plus 2.
Yep. Once and once. And so we are left with, in the numerator, a 2x and x minus 2 all over 1. I don't need to write over 1. Does that make sense? Clear?
Yeah.
You're supposed to say crystal. That's the saying. I say clear and you say crystal. Okay. So we're using everything we've learned. We're just going to keep factoring. Factor, 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 factor. Numerator, denominator, numerator, denominator. Okay, why don't you pause the recording and do the next two. All right, how do I factor the second denominator? Because that seems to be the only one. How about Isaiah? How do we factor that second denominator?
Would be over. You make it's a difference of squares.
Uh-huh.
So you would separate it, open parentheses, plus 1, close parentheses, open parentheses, minus 1, close parentheses.
Okay.
And then you would cancel out minus 1.
Okay. And now we could cross cancel the m minus 1. And so what am I left with, Isaiah?
You're left with 1 over 1.
No.
Or where?
What am I left with when I canceled? You said I could cross cancel m minus 1. What is left in the numerator and what is left?
In the numerator, wouldn't it be 1 over 1?
Yeah.
Times 3m over m plus 1.
And that simplifies too.
Or just 1 times 3m over
Which is?
3m over m plus 1.
Yes. Good. You don't need to tell me that, like, how to multiply 1 times. You can just go at that point. All right, the next one. How do I factor it? How about Aishu? Five times what? X plus 2. And it becomes? Good. Over. Good. And so what can we cross cancel? X plus 2, X plus 2. What else? Okay, how about I can take out a factor of 3 and I'm left with a 1 here, but what are we left up here? Negative 1. What else can be cross canceled? As long as it's numerator to denominator, we can cross cancel it. So now we are left with, in the numerator, a negative 1 over 5. Questions? Okay, do the next one. Pause the recording. Yes, let's start doing this together. I've got to do a little bit more with you. So let's just make sure we get to it. Okay, so the first one, what does it factor to? Who can tell me what the top one factors to? Let's go with Angelina.
X minus 4 times x plus 3 times x minus 3.
Hold on, over.
Over x minus 3 times x plus 3.
Times, what does the next one break down to?
X minus 3 times x plus 1.
Okay, and then the denominator, keep going.
X minus 4 times x plus 2.
Good. Okay, so now, oops, times what? Okay, what can we cross cancel? Jessa. X minus 4 and x minus 4. I'm left with a 1 and a 1. What else? Keep going. Let's go with Kaylee. Good. And what else? Keep going. Go. Okay. I'm left with a 1. And my final answer should be x plus 1 over x plus 2. Questions? Okay, now let me show you where it gets a little bit tricky. Okay, notice there's nothing really to factor, right? except the numerator of the first fraction and denominator of the second fraction are opposites. So how can I make it look...
Good afternoon, students and
All right, so what can I do? The first fraction is staying the same, a minus 1 over 4. But the second one, and I guess it really doesn't matter if you do it to the top of the first or the bottom. Let's go, Francis. We're not timesing, we're factoring a negative 1. That's called factoring. We're going to divide out a factor of negative 1, then it flips the 1 minus a to be the opposite, a minus 1. Now I have something I can cross cancel, and we are left with 2 goes into that twice, and 3 times we are left with 3 over negative 2. And on the bottom, now look here. As I'm factoring this, what would I factor? A negative 1. Now how does that break down? Yes. If I divide out the negative 1, what does it become?
T squared minus 3.
Right, which breaks down to t plus 3 times t minus 3. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. Guys, it's going to be all kinds of factoring, so don't be worried about it. Just factor. That's it.